In my yoga classes, we use our yoga blankets for more than just sitting on and lying on in restorative yoga poses. It's great to use a yoga blanket in those ways, and we do that in my classes. But we also use yoga blankets in like some really creative and novel ways to really work on strength in our yoga poses and to add more load and to really turn up the fire and the challenge in our yoga poses. So in this video, I'm going to share my top 5 ways to use a yoga blanket for strength. And if you appreciate this content, subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date on all of the content that I share. This yoga blanket strength move is called a lunge slide. And it's basically a play off of just kind of our standard stepping back into a high lunge in yoga. So here is just kind of the normal move that we would do in yoga. But we could use a yoga blanket to make it stronger and more challenging by stepping one foot on the blanket. So we would be on a surface that the blanket could slide on. And then we slide back slowly and with control, take our arms up, and then slowly and with control, we pull forward again. So slide back and then lift up. And this is a lot of load and work for the lower body to control here. We have to work with control through this whole range. And when I pull back up, I really get to feel hamstrings working on this front leg as the foot pulls back to pull me forward. And then also as I pull up, hip flexors on this back leg get to work in a lengthened position. They start in a lengthened position and then we pull forward. So this is a really great way to work on strength, really like through a full range in the lower body, and just a good way to increase our sense of control and our sense of challenge in good old high lunge pose, which we typically do here without having to, like really control that whole step back. So this kind of changes it and gives us a new experience in high lunge, as well as really ups the challenge and gives us more potential for strength. This yoga blanket strength move is a single leg squat slide. So it's kind of a play off Utkatasana or chair pose. So we know this is our chair pose. And sometimes we experiment with like a one-legged chair pose, and sometimes we take one leg out in front of us. So like a single leg chair pose. So we could take that similar idea and use the blanket, and then that would look something like this. So one foot forward onto the blanket, and then we slide forward and we pull back. We slide forward and pull back. And so this is a really great way to work and use that single leg squat idea. But here we really have to control this full range, like the entire movement from start to finish. And as we slide out, the standing leg, like this leg here, the squat leg, this leg is moving into a nice knee bend, which means that my quadriceps on that leg are working quite a bit. And then as you can see, I'm also, because the knee reaches forward, I'm also moving into some significant ankle dorsiflexion, which is that direction of movement. So it's a really nice mobilizer into ankle dorsiflexion. And then in addition to that, as I slide the front foot forward, I'm also lengthening these hamstring muscles on this leg. And then when I go to pull back, the hamstring muscles get to work starting in a lengthened position. They work to pull and slide the blanket back. So it's a great way to target both legs in kind of some different and complementary ways. And I think it's an excellent move to bring into our yoga practice using our simple yoga blanket. This yoga blanket move is called a single leg adductor slide. And we start in a tall kneeling position and then step one foot out onto the blanket. Then, without using any momentum, we slide out, and without using momentum, we pull back in. So this is targeting these adductor muscles. We have a collection of 5 inner thigh muscles that are our adductors, and they are lengthening here as we slide out. So they're stretching, but they're also working. And then we get to target them from this lengthened state. they work as they pull that blanket back in. So the adductor muscles, they contract eccentrically on the slide out and concentrically as they shorten on the slide in. So it's a really great way to target the adductor muscles through a full range of motion. And it's also a really great way, it doubles as a really great way to target adductor flexibility, because we know that when we strength train muscles through a full range of motion and including those longer ranges, that is a very potent way to increase flexibility. So I also feel like this single leg adductor slide kind of is a little reminiscent to me of the yoga pose Parigasana, or gate pose. So gate pose is generally practiced something like this. There are some variations, but like this is kind of our Parigasana pose. So you could even turn this into a bit of a flow. I kind of like this idea. You start in Parigasana, sweep up, slide out, and then pull back in with those adductors and return back to Parigasana. And you could just repeat this a few times. And you might notice that as you repeat the adductor slide, that even just within this one session of performing them, that you might feel your range of motion increase, because those muscles will start to, in an acute sense, lengthen and warm up and increase their range of motion for us. So this is one of my favorite yoga blanket strength moves. This yoga blanket strength move targets our anterior core, or our abdominals. So you're probably familiar with forearm plank. This is what forearm plank looks like. We come down, we could either have the forearms parallel or clasp the hands, and then we step back and we typically just hold statically in forearm plank. Forearm plank is already a good way to target the anterior core, but we can step it up and make this more challenging, significantly more challenging, by adding our yoga blanket. So forearms on the sticky surface of our yoga mat, but then our feet are on the blanket, which can slide. And then we come into forearm plank. We start here, and this is already harder than regular forearm plank because the blanket is slippery, so I have to work a little harder to hold myself in place. But then I can add on here by sliding the blanket back and pulling the blanket forward. And it tends to not be a huge range of motion because it takes really a lot of strength through the anterior core to control this position. And we don't want to slide back so far that we start to kind of tip into, do you see now I'm kind of in an anterior pelvic tilt and I've come into some spinal extension in my back. It is not bad to do that, but if we do that, we're not recruiting the anterior core muscles the way that we want to be. So ideally, you just slide within this range that you can control and maintain this position of like your posterior pelvic tilt and all the work that you feel through the anterior core. So this is a favorite yoga blanket strength move of mine. This yoga blanket strength move is a great way to target our hamstrings and to really work on this area of the body for strength. And that is something that yogis really tend to highly benefit from because we don't tend to do much, if any, targeted hamstring strengthening in yoga. So this is a great way to really bring that in. And these are called bridge slides. So you're probably familiar with bridge pose, in which we lie on our back, knees bent, feet flat, and then we lift our hips up. So this is bridge pose. But bridge slides look like this. We slide our feet forward on the blanket, but we still keep our hips off the floor. So I'm not all the way down on the floor. And then I pull back. This is a bridge slide. And do you see how this is targeting the hamstrings? So the hamstrings work eccentrically as they lengthen, as I slide the blanket out. If I held out here, they would work isometrically. And then they work concentrically as they shorten to pull the blanket back in. So it's a super effective way to target this area of the body for strength. And this variation where I keep the hips up the whole time, this variation can be very quite challenging, especially if you haven't really strengthened the hamstrings before. So if this is like new and quite challenging, we can certainly start by just keeping the hips down the whole time, and we can slide out like that and then dig our heels down and pull back in. And that should be enough to get us to start to feel some hamstring work. And then once that feels quite accessible, we could move to a stage 2, which would be just the eccentric phase of the bridge slide. So we would lift the hips up, slowly slide out. So this eccentric phase while the hamstrings are lengthening, slowly slide out. Then once we're out, let the hips come down and then pull the blanket back in. So that would be like a stage 2. And then once we feel nice and strong back there, we can do stage 3, which is to keep the hips up the whole time. And there are even more ways to progress and add on to the challenge here, but I think we'll leave it at that for right now. This is one of my favorite yoga blanket strength moves, and everyone's hamstrings who tries this thanks them.